Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Well, thank you for tuning back into Twisted Tales, folks. I hope everybody's having a wicked day. Now, this episode here is kind of cringy, and yeah, it's about a sick bastard anyway. And this was actually a special request from my good buddy Shaun Hunt. And I told him I'd pop this off. I just had to get time to do it. Like, I had time at the lake there for a bit. I haven't had vacation in 5 years, so it was a good to get away. I'll tell you that. So, this episode here, like I said, it's going to be a bit rough. So we're going to talk about a known Canadian rapist, serial killer, and arsonist, known as Alan Joseph Legier, or, as others know him, as the Miramichi Monster. Now, Legier was an active serial killer from 1986 to 1989, mostly in the Miramichi region of New Brunswick. Some will call him the worst of the worst. And like any serial killer, there's always early days. So let me get into that here. So, Alan was born February 13th, 1948, in Chatham Head, New Brunswick. So the Miramichi Monster nickname got coined to him, even though at the time Miramichi wasn't actually in existence at that time. It was more because of the region along the Miramichi River. And like, the guy worked some odd jobs and shit. Like, he was once a car salesman from outside of Ottawa, did a little bit of mechanic work the odd time, and he actually owned a farmhouse in Increment, New Brunswick. So, all this shit show, the trial, everything, it will be the first time in Canadian history that DNA evidence was presented. Like, Miramichi is a great little spot to visit, and it's like the largest city in northern New Brunswick, Canada. And it actually incorporated as a city in 1995. So the city of Miramichi is like northeastern New Brunswick, like I said, at the mouth of the Miramichi River. And it's like one of Canada's most famous salmon rivers, right? So I'm going to give you a little history here about that. And, like, it would be home to the Micmac First Nations around 1765. So the city was part of the French colony of Acadia. And it was also part of the French and Indian War in 1754, with many homes being destroyed by the British. So, it was also part of the American Revolution and the Battle at Miramichi in 1779, the Great Miramichi Fire of 1825, Irish immigration from 1815 to 1850, and I think pretty much the railway from like 1875 to 1950. So, like, they even had a hand, like, that was like pretty much the intercolonial railway. Like, just to name a little bit of history for you guys, right? Like, and even like the area's economy, it's mostly focused on mining, fishing, and forestry. Has some tourism sectors, mind you. And manufacturing is also like a little bit of a big thing there, right? And it's just a lovely province. So, definitely check it out if you're around. And like, it's just a peaceful place, like any other place before it, right? Like, people didn't lock their doors or shit like that. They slept peacefully without any worry, you know? And that's all gonna change without warning one night with our boy Alan Legier. Now, on June 21st, 1986, Alan and a couple accomplices, named Todd Matchett and Scott Curtis. The boys set their eye on like a little convenience store that they were going to rob. So this was located in Black River Bridge, late in the evening, and they had cut all the power to the store, and they began robbing and attacking the elderly couple that ran the mom and pop store. Their names were John and Mary Glendening. Now, John was 66 years old. The three men beat John and then strangled him to death. All while Mary clung to life after being beaten and raped by the three men. She was left for dead. She actually woke up with her face in a toilet bowl and a scarf tied tightly around her neck. She actually regained consciousness, and she noticed her poor husband dead, beaten to death. He was actually left in a pool of his own blood. Blood was all over the place, smeared on the walls, and it was just a senseless fucking robbery. And, poor Mary, as sore as she was totally grief-stricken. She actually crawled up the stairs and telephoned 911. Now, during the search of the crime scene when the cops got there, they found $3,400 in the basement that was missed by the killers, who had opted for the store safe. And a Canada-wide warrant was set into place to catch these three men. Alan had actually put the money from the robbery on his girlfriend's bed, and he started counting the blood-stained money. And the trio of men stole a total of $45,000. Alan's cut was $14,000. But these assholes wouldn't even have a chance to spend the robbery money, as police caught up to them after they tracked them down here a little bit. So Todd Matchett kind of pled guilty to murdering John and brutally beating his wife Mary. Curtis and Legier would actually be convicted later on in trial. Now, on January 6, 1987, the three went on trial for the robbery, the murder of Glendening, and the attack on his wife. So, Mary testified at the trial. Matchett, Curtis, and Legier were found guilty of murder on January 22, 1987. Alan sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 18 years. The other two men got life in prison with no chance of parole for 16 years. And with more than 1,000 locals attending the trial outside, losing their shit, and they wanted actually for the men to be hanged, so they were screaming pretty good at them, right? Now, Legier ended up serving his time for the murder at the Atlantic Institution in Rennes-Corville. That's actually a Canadian federal corrections facility. Formerly, this building was used as an ammunition drop by Canadian forces. Now, he played a little bit of a rouge here. He said he had an ear injury or an ear infection. So on May 3rd, 1989, Alan was transported by personnel from the pen to Dr. Georges L. Dumont Regional Hospital in Moncton, New Brunswick. So, like I said, he wanted to treat an ear infection. So, when he got there, he somehow convinced the personnel overseeing him to let him use the hospital washroom alone. And when he was alone, he picked the lock to the handcuffs he was wearing from a homemade key that he shoved up his ass. Now, after all that happened, he unlocked the handcuffs. He then used a piece of TV antenna to hold the guards at bay until he escaped on foot before stealing an automobile to get away clean. So, he had some balls, I'll give him that. So, after Legier's escape, he'd be active in criminal activities over a period of 7 months. So during this time, he'd commit 4 additional murders in Chatham, New Brunswick, and Newcastle, New Brunswick. So, May 28th, 1989, Alan had broken into the home of Annie and Nina Flam. Annie was 75 years old, and Nina was 61. The two had lived above a grocery store that Annie had ran for well over 50 years. He raped both women, along with severely beating them. Upon leaving the horrific crime scene, Alan then set fire to their home. Rescuers had arrived on the scene, and Nina would be found at the bottom of a stairway, clinging to life. Nina was raped, beaten, bound, and burned from the fire started by Alan. Most likely, he did this to cover up the evidence of his crimes. Now, poor Annie was found dead in her bedroom, bound to a chair. Police had noticed similarities to this crime and the Glendening crime, and Alan became a main suspect. Because, there's only so much shit you can do that, before police figure it out. Now, on October 13th, 1989, Donna Alberta Donnie, a 45-year-old woman, and her sister Linda Lou Donnie were attacked in their home. He'd broken in, he sexually assaulted both, and Alan had pretty much beaten them like his previous crimes, and he set their house on fire. Now, Donna had died from the severe beating that he gave her, and Linda died from a combination of the beating and smoke inhalation from the fire. Alan actually knew Linda from previous years, and he tried advances on her, but she rejected him. So I'm not sure if he did that out of spite, because he did this whole, like, I'm gonna kill people that did me wrong thing, right? So police patrolled everywhere looking for Alan. Every small town, every little village, mainly because Legier had somewhat of a history with, like, some of the small villages. Like, he knew where he was going, he knew people in them, so anybody could harbor that fugitive, right? And these patrols took place between November 15th, 1989. Now, police missed this guy by one night. On November 16th, Father James Smith had been in the rectory of Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church. Now, when Alan had broken in, he beat him to death. The next day, parishioners found Father Smith as he failed to show up for Mass that day. And Alan had actually left behind tools from a failed attempt to break in the church's vault. Now, like, Father Smith, he was just an old elderly man. Like, he was a man of God, right? The poor guy had 13 broken ribs. He was stabbed numerous times. And they kind of noticed money missing, and the father's car was gone, stolen by Alan. And, like, Alan actually knew Father Smith. He had a previous run-in with him while Alan was serving time for the Glendinning murder. And, like, Alan kind of bragged about getting even with those that wronged him. And the father was actually only 69. And his life got taken away by a piece of shit human being. And it's just like a terrible thing to do. Like, all of it was like, I mean, all these folks were older and couldn't really defend themselves from this guy. And in all reality, this guy was a fucking monster. Like, he did nothing but prey on people. And Crime Stoppers actually put out reward money for the capture of Alan. It had like it kind of reacted, like the whole reaction to the Crime Stoppers capture money was $50,000. Over time, it was like really enticing, as the reward money was for info on Alan, and if it brought authorities any closer to him, that they give them the money, right? But this brought them, it didn't even bring them any closer to finding him. And on the night of November 23rd, in St. John's, New Brunswick, Alan had hijacked a taxi at gunpoint. So he held the cab driver, Ron Gamke, to drive him to Moncton, all in the midst of a giant snowstorm. There was icy roads, tons of blowing snow, and this made the trip wicked dangerous. Now, Ron had crashed into a huge snowbank, with Alan starting to wave down passerby cars. Eventually, he flagged one down, and the driver of that vehicle was actually an off-duty RCMP officer named Michelle Mercer. Alan now had both at gunpoint, demanding Mercer now take the reins and drive to Moncton in the blinding snowstorm. Eventually, she lost her way, and they pulled into a gas station near Sussex, New Brunswick. So they stopped in for gas, and where her and the cab driver would actually escape with the vehicle, and they left Alan behind. Alan then flagged down a transport truck, telling the driver, a man named Brian Golding, to take him to Moncton. Now, in the meantime, RCMP officer Mercer she reached out to an emergency telephone line, and she notified police of the whole shit show. Now, all the things that just went through, she was just, like, beside herself, right? But she kept it cool, and she got police pouring into the area. Like, even roadblocks were set up all over. Now, on the morning of November 24th, police had stopped the truck that Alan had been in, and this was near Newcastle area. And Alan didn't put up any kind of a fight. and he was arrested without a struggle. And yeah, he didn't fight, he didn't do anything. He just laid down. There you go. So, after this piece of shit got captured, a jury had to be made. And it actually took some time because most of the people that were picked for jury duty were afraid of Alan. Like, mostly because of his revenge killing. Like, he's like, oh, I'm gonna kill anybody that's ever wronged me, all this shit, right? And the defense lawyer had gone through 40 prospective jurors before settling on 8 women and 4 men. One witness was actually a citizen named Margaret Olive, and she and Legier had a brief encounter at one point. She was actually leaving a hospital parking lot where Legier escaped from prior, and he threatened her with a screwdriver that he had, and he hopped in the car with her. She drove him 10 minutes up the road, and he actually released her unharmed, which is weird, because, witnesses and all, right? So, on his way to court, Legier seen some reporters for CBC, and he yelled out, "CBC must be hard up for news. Good thing I came back." So, he had a little bit of a character to him. And some actually say Alan Legier was actually compared to Charles Manson, mainly for his influential ways. Pretty much, like, he can make almost anyone do as he wanted. So, I mean, like, that would even help him with, like accomplices and shit. Like, he could pretty much brainwash people into helping him with shit. So I guess I can see why he was compared to Manson, because Manson did all that shit, right? So, like, while he awaited trial, he almost convinced a news reporter named Carolyn Norwood to actually leave her husband of 30 years for him. And the husband actually had to step in, so, I mean, I'm sure that was a happy marriage down the road, right? Now, on August 17th, 1990, Legier is sentenced to 9 years for escaping custody for his earlier escape, and kidnapping and assault relating to his May 3rd, 1989 escape. And November 20th, 1990, he was actually charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. So, December 6th, 1990, a preferred indictment containing, like, the 4 murder charges that were filed with the Court Queen's Bench of Newcastle, they were actually transferred to Burton Courthouse. So, on June 7th, 1991, a hearing that went for about 19 days had concluded because the hearings were to determine the admissibility of DNA evidence. Now, DNA evidence in 1991 in Canada was, like, pretty uncommon. And even during trials, like, and this trial became an important test case, or, like, dare I say, a trial run. Haha. So, it was pretty much for, like semen and fingerprint and all that stuff, right? So, like, this would be the first Canadian use of DNA profiling to convict a criminal rather than exonerate. And like I said, like, semen and other samples had to tie Legier to all 3 crime scenes. So, like, he was just a piece of shit. Like, even, like, the whole court system, like, classified him as a dangerous offender. And this title goes to Canada's most violent criminals. And, like, even criminals that are considered likely to reoffend. He was found guilty on November 3rd, 1991, being sentenced 2 days later on the 4 other murders, right? So, this was when he did a 7-month killing spree and other criminal activities. So he received total 4 life sentences, and they're actually to be served concurrently. And he's not eligible for parole for 25 years. After the case, trial, and conviction, like, nobody talked about the case pretty much, and it was mainly out of fear for the supporters of Legier. Like, he had some followers, right? And even they were worried about friends that knew him that lived around the area. Like, if they talked about him, maybe they'd come and kill them or beat them or whatever, right? Like, he was a pretty horrific guy. So, a few days after being found guilty, police wanted to transfer him to a new prison, as he was familiar with the layout of the one he was going to, and the general area surrounding it. The police kind of thought it to be like a super high escape risk. Now, he spent from 1991 to 2015 at Special Handling Unit, and this is a Canadian federal prison complex at Saint-Anne-des-Plaines, Quebec. It's Canada's highest security prison, or like supermax, if you will. Now, inmates are always handcuffed in the presence of officers. Even when escorting inmates, officers are unarmed. So this is to prevent inadvertently placing a weapon in front of a prisoner. They only carried pepper spray. But the weapons and other fun things were manned by the officers on the elevated catwalks. And inmates must progress through programs that they have there, like before being transferred back to Gen Pop, or any other maximum security prisons. And although the ones deemed too high risk to be eligible for these programs, they're actually detained for like longer periods. So from 2015 to present, Allen's actually incarcerated at the Edmonton Institution in Alberta, Canada. So throughout the years, Allen actually applied for parole numerous times, but being the piece of shit that he is, he was refused each time. This guy doesn't need to get out. And, the most recent parole hearing was actually January 13th, 2021. And even, a parole board spokesperson, Paula Vargas, she said, if Legier is ever released, he will remain under supervision of correctional officers. Life means life, whether the offender is incarcerated or supervised. So, I don't want this guy out. No, nobody does. This guy's crazy. And he's still incarcerated at the prison in Edmonton now, and he's 75 years old. So I doubt he can do much, but you never know. And even a parole board member told Allen, your risk is not manageable. The victim's harm is still felt to this day, and you have a number of outstanding issues. And they even asked him, do you consider yourself a violent person? And he simply answered, no, not at all. They asked him a bunch of shit, are you a sex offender? And he's like, nope. And a board member replied with, your file kind of speaks to more severe violence. And even the deaths that happened, you're responsible for. And he just fed them a bunch of bullshit. Legier, he... the whole board member just rammed him. Everything they asked him, he said he wasn't. They asked about his sexual violent tendencies, and he said, nope. Female prison employees weren't even afraid of me. And I'm not like that, he said. But the board members, one named Amy Agar, she said that, contrary to what he just said, there were issues with female employees. He had a fixation with some of the staff. He actually wrote them poetry and made them homemade cards and shit. So, she said, it seems you do have issues. And even a former officer who worked the Legier case long ago, when he was on his 7-month crime spree, his name was Constable Kenneth McGee. He remembers this being a huge part of his career, and it still haunts him to this day. He was actually 28 years old at the time when serial killer Legier was on the loose terrorizing Miramichi area. Now, he remembered those 7 months to be very tense. People would open their doors with guns in hand, and, even running through yards, people would have their guns out, and what the fuck, right? It's just a total chaos shit. People were scared. What do you do, right? There's a fucking serial killer on the loose. So, even, the yards had poles in them that illuminated light when someone was snooping around. So, like sensor lights that are still around today. And the police nicknamed these, Legier lights. And even officers that were on foot patrol, they were required to sport bright traffic vests at night. So they wanted to have these on when responding to reported sightings. Now, he recalls running through backyards and shit, and even officers had questioned the bright vests, mainly because it would make them easier to be seen by him. But supervisors responded with, well, everybody else will be able to see you too, so that way they won't get shot or anything, right? Somebody's running through the backyard or snooping around looking for the killer, right? But McGee's most haunting and vivid memories are from the night of October 28th. So this is about a month before Legier was caught. McGee had been driving home, actually from chaperoning a youth dance. So a report came over the radio that weapons were taken from a truck parked outside a motel in Chatham. Now McGee went to check, but there was limited manpower, so it was pretty low for officers. Now the officer at the scene told McGee that he's in the house. He tossed him a shotgun. So McGee said, "Okay, we surrounded the house, and here I am in civilian clothes." So he made his presence known, and as it turns out, Legier actually took off before McGee had arrived. Now, McGee was sent home to change into his uniform and continue the search. His wife would actually lay out his uniform in the order he would put it on, as they were getting called out all the time. Now, with Legier being at large at this time, extra police were brought in, mostly from other parts of the province and across Canada. Now, protocol was to pair up with a local officer to do searches. So later on in the night, McGee and another officer had hopped into a police vehicle, and they headed towards a golf course. So he kind of remembers like this happened just like yesterday. Now, while on the road, they heard gunshots, but didn't know who the shots were directed at. They put the vehicle in park and took cover by some nearby trees. And he actually looked at the lights, still left on, he left them on in the vehicle by mistake. Now, McGee said he was going to run back and turn them off, but the other RCMP officer grabbed him and said, "Don't. That could be exactly what he's waiting for. Just pitch black, right? You don't know who the fuck's out there. And you're armed, so you might have a chance, but it's still a scary situation." And the two officers were back to back, one with a handgun, the other with a shotgun. He remembers every sound in the woods. Everything will make them jump, and out of nowhere. And over time, an eerie fog actually started coming out. So, this would kind of stick with him for the rest of his life. Still, And they were actually ready to do whatever they had to do. Everything there with them went quiet. Like, McGee even thought about his family and if he'd ever see them again. But Legier evaded capture. And this is the night that McGee often thinks of. Like, even leaving his lights on was his mistake. He gets it. And he actually thinks it helped the monster Miramichi get away. And a fucking supervisor was a complete dick. He came up to him after the fact saying, "I understand you left your car lights on." And then McGee explained his reason. And he said, "It doesn't matter the reason why. It's the reason that he got away. And if anyone else dies because of this, it's your fault." And he's lived with that for 30 plus years now, he said. And, yeah, that's a nice little tale I have for you guys there, so I hope that about wraps things up. I hope you guys all enjoyed that, and, this episode, like I said, was to my buddy Shaun Hunt. And I hope this was up to par, my buddy. Now, thanks for tuning back into Twisted Tales. I love you guys. Everybody's sending me stories to do, and it's daily now, which is awesome. I got a whole bunch of shit I gotta get done. So, you can check us out on Spotify, follow, give us a rating. I'm also on Amazon Music app and iHeartRadio. So if you guys want to check it out, my Facebook group's there. Just search Twisted Tales and we'll go from there. I'll update anybody on new episodes and everything, and we'll keep going. It's just been it's been a lot with work and whatever, and I took a little vacation to the lake with the family, so it was a good time. I enjoyed myself, and I needed that because I have not taken a break from work in forever. So anyway, thank you very much for tuning back in, guys, and I hope you guys have a wicked day. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your work week, guys.
Alan Legier says he expected to be denied parole, but wanted to address the victims of violence and the parole board. Legier is convicted of 5 murders, 4 of which while he was on the run for months. Legier said he was present for those murders, but says others were involved. When asked if he understands and still thinks about the suffering he caused to the victims and the community, Legier says he understands that, but doesn't understand why people can't forgive and forget. The parole eligibility hearing was held in Edmonton for the notorious New Brunswick serial killer. Legier often trailed off on longer stories when asked questions, such as those about remorse. Legier's crimes after he escaped custody in 1989 included brutal murders, arsons, and sexual assault. With the terrorizing violence he committed while on the run, Legier would become the subject of an intense, months-long manhunt. Now 72 years old, Alan Legier originally received a life sentence for murdering convenience store owner John Glendenning in 1986. Housed in Renouse, New Brunswick at the time, he escaped during a medical visit to Moncton, undoing his shackles and fleeing from guards. During his time on the run, he killed elderly store owner Annie Flam. His next victims were Donna and Linda Donnie. Legier eventually set their home on fire. Then he killed Roman Catholic priest Reverend James Smith. He was eventually taken back into custody later in '89. The parole board says it's heard many victim statements and statements from the community expressing concern or fear with the idea he could have been released. In the parole board's ruling, board member Delane Dew said, quote, "Your offending is of the most serious nature. The victim harm is still felt to this day." Dew said the board has concluded Legier's risk was not manageable in the community and that he is high risk and should be kept in maximum security. Legier has 3 months if he wants to appeal the decision.
Twisted Tales.